What's good here? It's Russell Kenner. Today we're going to be discussing the recent episode of AEW Dynamite, the go home show to AEW Dynasty, and we're finna go ahead and jump straight into it. First, we got Jon Moxley returning from AEW, returning from Japan, and he just won the Iwgp Championship, the most prestigious, the most sought out championship in Japan. He cuts a promo, basically talks about this is the championship he's been fighting for. Championship he's been fighting for 5 years. Talked about the haters, how the haters doubted him, how people said that it was impossible for him to win that championship. It was possible for him to bring it to AEW, and he finally did it. Then he starts alluding to Don Callis, the Don Callis family, how they attacked Daniel Bryan and Claudio. Of course, he didn't take that well since Claudio and Bryan Danielson are his friends. He ends up calling out Powerhouse Hobbs, and he wants a match for next week. And next week we're gonna get Powerhouse Hobbs, and we're gonna get Powerhouse Hobbs and Jon Moxley in a one-on-one match for next week's Dynamite. Then next up we got Willow Nightingale, Adam Copeland versus Julia Hart and Brody King. Adam Copeland, after he makes his entrance, they show a Titantron of Willow Nightingale and Chris Statlander. It looks like Willow Nightingale is injured. She has like a neck injury. Chris Statlander is trying to convince Willow not to go out. Willow is trying to fight through it, but Chris Statlander is telling her not to go. The lights go out. Of course, when the lights come back on, Brody King, Julia Hart. Brody King comes from behind and attack Adam Copeland. And it's still a mixed tag match, but it's basically a handicap match. Brody King dominated a good portion of this match since, Adam got attacked from behind, and of course he can't make a tag because his partner is not there. We had a decent of sequence though. We had a sequence where Brody King ended up putting Adam Copeland onto a chair, running into the chair with his body and landing onto the chair, onto Adam Copeland, into the barricade. That was a good sequence. It was also a moment where Adam Copeland ended up doing like a flipping neck breaker off the top rope. That was very impressive. But later on into the match, Adam Copeland tries to go for a spear, gets reversed, gets clotheslined by Brody King. Willow Nightingale ends up coming out, and then Brody King, Julia Hart, they're all confused. They thought Willow Nightingale was out. Brody King has Adam Copeland like this type of arm hold. Willow Nightingale ends up tagging herself in without Adam Copeland even noticing. Adam Copeland didn't even know where he was at. Willow Nightingale tags herself in, gets on the top rope, jumps onto Brody King. She tries to attack Julia Hart, but Julia Hart ends up jumping off the ring apron. Then out of nowhere, Adam Copeland ends up spearing Brody King. Willow Nightingale looks surprised, looks shocked, looks over to Adam Copeland. She's distracted. Julia Hart ends up getting a chain, wraps it around her hand. The referee is distracted as well. Punch Willow Nightingale, knocks her out, puts her in a submission hold to act like she tapped her out, knocked her unconscious. The ref sees it, calls the match, and Julia Hart and Willow Nightingale ends up winning the match. They picked up the victory here. But then after the match, Mercedes Moné comes out. She comes out with a steel chair, trying to get payback for, thinking Julia Hart, the one that attacked her from last week. Comes out with a chair. Julia Hart, of course, ends up running away, escaping. Then it's just Willow Nightingale and Mercedes Moné. And it looks like for a second, Mercedes Moné was actually going to use the chair on Willow Nightingale because she still hasn't gotten over her getting injured. But Adam Copeland comes in the ring. He ends up staring Mercedes now. Mercedes ends up, tossing the chair away. And nothing happened. Mercedes and Adam Copeland shake hands, and that was the end of that segment right there. This was a solid segment, building up more tension. The trio of Julia Hart, Willow Nightingale, and Mercedes Moné. I'm kind of interested to see where this goes. I don't know where this is going to go after Dynasty because I think Willow Nightingale is going to win, and I think they're going to focus solely on Willow and Mercedes, but I could be wrong. But next up, we got Samoa Joe getting interviewed by Renee. Renee ends up asking him about Samoa Joe about Swerve Strickland, about him being champion one day, and Samoa Joe ends up saying that I viewed him as a worthy adversary, and someday he could have made a great champion. but he's more of a nuisance. He's not someone who has superior speed, power, or strength. He's somebody who keeps getting up after I knock him down. That doesn't seem like world champion. That seems more of a punching bag to me. Then Renee ends up asking him about last week about Swerve holding the title. Swerve holding the title. Joe ends up responding, said that he was worried that the title was in the wrong hands. And he ends up calling Swerve a choke artist. He ends up bringing up how every time Swerve gets an opportunity, he's always so close, but he ends up choking in the end. And he loses every opportunity he gets. And he says that Dynasty, history will repeat itself. And those are great points. And I love Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe is a great talker, good at trash talk, the arrogant, cocky, superior guy. I really love Samoa Joe. I can't wait for that match at Dynasty. Can't wait for Swerve to take that title off Samoa Joe, even though Samoa Joe has been a great champion. But can't wait for that match. But then we got next up, we got the Young Bucks. It was a promo package that was popping up on the stream with the Young Bucks and FTR. But Matt Jackson and the Young Bucks end up interrupting it, ends up cutting that segment. And Matt Jackson said that Dynamite is too jam-packed and that they have to bump their segment off, which I thought was hilarious. I really thought that was a good sequence. But next up, we got the Young Bucks versus Okada. Young Bucks and Okada versus Daniel Garcia, Penta, and Pac. This was a very decent, solid match. We had some nice sequences. We had a lot of sequences with Daniel Garcia's dance. It started off with Daniel end up hitting his dance on Nick Jackson on the turnbuckle. And then another sequence where Matt Jackson hit the dance on Pac. And then Nick Jackson ends up getting his revenge on Daniel, end up going on the turnbuckle, hitting his dance back on Daniel. Really love that sequence. But towards the end of the match, we got a sequence where Pac and Okada was doing a back and forth. Pac ends up doing a super kick to Okada. Tries to go off the top rope, but Matt Jackson ends up pushing him down off the top rope. Pac tags in Penta. No, he tags in Daniel Garcia. Yeah, he tags in Daniel Garcia. Okada ended up doing a power driver on Daniel, and then Penta tries to come in, tries to make the save, but Okada ends up reversing, hits him with a power driver. Then the Young Bucks ends up doing a super kick to Daniel, and Okada ends up doing his signature clothesline, and they pick up the victory. After the match, we got the Young Bucks start attacking Daniel Garcia specifically, and they end up hitting their EVP trigger onto Daniel. Then they end up bringing out a ladder. End up body slamming Daniel's body on the ladder, and then they start putting Daniel Garcia's body in between the ladder, like his back was laid on the bottom half of the ladder, and then the front half was laid on his chest and his face. They was finna go on the top rope and jump onto the ladder with his body on it, but Pac ends up making the save and preventing that, and that was the end of the segment. That was the end of the whole sequence of there, right there. And I ain't gonna lie, at first I wasn't really feeling the whole Matt Jackson and the whole Young Bucks, heel turn, but it's really starting to grow on me. Their whole, them trying to be super professional, these, corporate guys. I'm really starting to connect with their characters. Really, Matt Jackson. I'm really starting to like his character. In the match, he was actually commentating in the match while wrestling a bit, which I thought was hilarious. But I'm really starting to mess with this gimmick, and I think it has a lot of potential. But next up, we got Chris Jericho, Hook, and Taz. They end up having a promo, to basically allude to what happened last week. Chris Jericho trying to get his side of the things, what happened last week of Dynamite. Chris started off by saying that he said the reason why he ends up pulling Hook off the ring apron from last week, he said that he wanted to get Hook's attention, and he felt he wasn't listening to him as much as he should. He said that he's doing all of this for you. Well, he's doing all this for Hook. And then Chris Jericho starts listing off the people of who listened to him, who got him better. He lists off MJF, Eddie Kingston, Orange Cassidy. And he ends up saying that everyone who comes out of the Jericho vortex comes out better. And then he asks Hook, is he finally ready to listen to him? Hook responds, he says no. Chris Jericho is confused. He's like, what are you talking about? Hook says he don't need his help. Chris responds, said, don't be an idiot. Taz ends up interrupting Chris, but because he feels like Chris is going a little too far. Chris ends up responding to Taz, said, basically told him to shut up, like, don't interrupt. Then he ends up responding to Taz. He said that I am doing what you should have done 30 years ago, which is give him some proper advice. And then he ends up responding back to Hook, and he ends up saying that I need to help you. Yeah, he said, I need to help you get rid of this dead weight that you've been carrying for the past 30 years. Taz wants to interrupt Chris again, but Chris ends up responding saying that you need to stop. Chris constantly trying to stop Taz from interrupting. He just strictly want to talk to Hook. Then Chris ends up responding to Hook, ends up saying that you're not as good as you think you are. Taz ends up interrupting again. Chris Jericho had enough, pushes Taz onto the ground. Then the crowd ends up going crazy. Crowd constantly yelling, you fucked up, holy shit. Then Hook ends up grabbing Chris Jericho, pushes him towards the turnbuckle, and basically ends up saying that you crossed the line, and told him to get out. Chris Jericho got out. Took a very long time to get out too. He was trying to keep trying to reason with Hook, but it was no point to drag that out. But Chris Jericho ended up getting out, and that was the end of the segment. I don't know what the angle is here, because I don't know what Chris Jericho can really do for Hook at this point of his career, because Hook already beat him. So now the way they made Chris Jericho act, it does feel like he was more of a heel in this segment. When he was with Taz, talking to Taz, he felt like a heel, but when he was a Hook, he was still trying to be like this baby face. So they could be doing a turn. I don't know, but I don't know how this really benefits Hook, because he already beat Chris Jericho. Beating him again won't do many favors. But I will say this segment was better than anything else they was doing before, so the feud is getting better to a degree. Next, we got Swerve Strickland. He's getting interviewed by Renee. He ends up responding to Samoa Joe calling him a choke artist, and then Swerve ends up talking about how he constantly stumbles. He talk about that when it comes to stumbling, he stumbled all his way to AEW. He stumbled his way to the top, and then he ends up saying something like, even though he stumbles a lot, he always falls forward into success. And then he ends up mentioning Samoa Joe. He mentioning how he ends up he says he always falls into success. Yes, he always falls forward into success. Then he talks about how he never gives up, and how no matter what comes at him, he always gets back up. He mentions Samoa Joe punching him with the chain. He got back up. He mentions how he got put in the coffin. I think that was at All In. Yeah, the All In match. He got put in the coffin, but he got back up. Talked about he got staples to the face against Hangman, but he always gets back up. Then Renee ends up asking Swerve Strickland what makes him so confident that he could beat Samoa Joe. Swerve Strickland is responding, said that I shouldn't be answering this to you. I should be answering that question to Joe. He gets up, takes off a jacket, takes off a hat, and says that I'm going to say what I need to say to Samoa Joe's face. Really love that. Love the fire and energy and Swerve Strickland had. He's not playing no games. He's sick and tired of it. He's just ready to fight Samoa Joe to take that championship off of Samoa Joe. I really love that segment. Next up, we got Deonna Purrazzo and Mariah May. Not going to really talk too much about this, because this was an alright match, and for the most part, both women was dominating. It wasn't really a back and forth. It was either Mariah May was dominating or Deonna Purrazzo was dominating. Not really much. But towards the end of the match, Mariah May ends up reversing a powerbomb from Deonna Purrazzo. Mariah May ends up hitting her hip attack maneuver on Deonna Purrazzo. Hits the DDT, reference to Toni Storm, former DDT, pins her, Deonna kicks out at 2. Then Mariah May goes for her finisher, the Mayday. Deonna kicks out. She kicks out, but then she tries to roll her up, but Mariah May ends up countering it, ends up sitting on top of her for the pin. But then Deonna counters that into a roll-up, picks up the victory. Toni Storm ends up attacking Deonna Purrazzo, constantly kicking her. Thunder Rosa ends up coming out for the save. She ends up coming in for the rescue, but then Deonna and Thunder Rosa are both arguing, of course, from what happened last week when Thunder Rosa didn't want Deonna help. So now Thunder Rosa ends up helping Deonna. So I'm assuming Deonna doesn't want her help now. They're going back and forth. But then Mariah May ends up sweeping Deonna Purrazzo's legs, and then they end up having a brawl outside the ring. Then Toni Storm try to sneak attack Thunder Rosa, but Thunder Rosa ends up countering it, ends up getting the upper hand, and then Toni Storm is laid flat on her stomach. Thunder Rosa is laid on is sitting on top of her back. She pulls out lipstick and ends up drawing lipstick all over Toni Storm's face, and then ends up smearing her face into lipstick to get her smearing her face with lipstick, getting her payback from last week when she smeared her face with a towel, messing up her makeup. That was very great. I love that. Love that callback from last week. Next up, we got Bullet Club Gold getting interviewed by Renee. I'm not going to spend too much time with it, but basically their match at Dynasty, the 6-man tag, will be for the Ring of Honor Trios Championships and will be for the AEW World Trios Championship. So that is very interesting. It made me a bit more invested in this feud. Unfortunately, I don't see Jay White winning that match. I don't see Bullet Club Gold winning that match. I really think they're going to give both titles to the Acclaim, which I'm not mad at, but I just hope better for Jay White, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. I just don't see Jay White winning that match. But next up, we got Orange Cassidy versus Shane Taylor. I'm not gonna really go that in depth into this match. This match was decent. This match was solid, but I'm not gonna go that in depth into the match. But I will go into the ending sequence. It was the ending sequence of this match where Orange Cassidy, they was having a back and forth. Orange Cassidy ends up reversing a power driver. I think Shane Taylor was about to hit. Ends up reversing it. Shane Taylor ends up kneeing Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy hits his orange punch. Then but it didn't knock him down. Shane Taylor ends up punching Orange Cassidy. Then Orange Cassidy comes back, hits the orange punch again, knocks it down, picks up the victory. Then the members of the Shane Taylor promotion ends up jumping Orange Cassidy. They end up jumping him, but then Matt Sydal and I think another person came up, tried to help Orange Cassidy from getting jumped, but Trent Beretta prevents Matt Sydal and the other guy. I don't know the other guy's name. I don't remember. But he ends up preventing them from saving Orange Cassidy, and he allowed Shane Taylor Promotions to constantly attack Orange Cassidy. Because it was a sequence where after he got rid of Matt Sydal, it was him on the outside and Shane Taylor Promotions like ready to like fight. But he told him to just keep beating him up, keep fighting him, keep attacking him. And they kept doing that. So Trent Beretta is really sticking to him being a heel, and I'm interested to see where that goes. Next we got the main event. Will Ospreay versus Claudio. Going to be honest with you guys, I did not watch this match. I was extremely tired, and part of me really didn't care for this match. Not because I don't care for Will Ospreay. It's just that I know it's going to be a good match, but it's hard for me personally. It's very hard for me to get invested into matches that have little to no story. Now, I know Orange Cassidy and Shane Taylor didn't have story, to be fair, but I was more awake when that happened, and so that was a little different. But Will Ospreay on Claudio, I was very tired when I was watching this, so I don't really have much of a memory here. I just mainly remember what happened after the match. Will Ospreay ends up picking up the victory. Will Hobbs, Kyle Fletcher, and Konosuke Kateska ends up attacking Claudio. They're trying to, get the upper hand on Claudio. They end up triple teaming. But Jon Moxley ends up coming in for the save, for the rescue. Ends up not really evening the odds, but he ends up making enough of a difference where basically they end up getting the upper hand. And that was the end of that segment right there. Then we got the last segment of the night of Swerve Strickland cuts a promo, comes out to the ring. He mentions the upcoming match he's gonna have a Dynasty. He mentions how he ends up hitting my fault. He mentions how he hit Samoa Joe with the chain last week. He mentions how he ended up holding a title, and he ends up saying that when he holds that title, Samoa Joe was scared because he knows that his title reign is coming to an end, and that he would be the new AEW World Champion. Then he ends up saying that, forget all the talking. He ends up calling out Joe because he says he want to say it to his face. He needs to say all the things he's saying now to his face. Samoa Joe comes out, and it's like a bunch of security guards trying to stop Samoa Joe from coming to the ring. Samoa Joe is outside the ring. Swerve is in the ring. The security guards are not trying to let Joe in the ring. Swerve is on demon time, bro. He was not playing. Swerve gets on the top rope and does a curb stomp onto the security guards to wipe them out. That was sick. Swerve Strickland ain't playing no games, and Swerve Strickland is showing that he ain't scared of Samoa Joe. Then he walks up to Samoa Joe and ends up pointing at the title and says that, I'm going to take that title away from you. Samoa Joe gets angry, starts brawling with Swerve, throws Swerve into the steel steps, puts him back in the ring. He puts him back in the ring. Then it was a sequence where Samoa Joe ends up getting a little too overconfident, a little arrogant. Because Prince Nana was checking up on Swerve Strickland after he put him in the ring, and he starts doing, Prince Nana dance behind him. It looks like he was about to attack Prince Nana, but Swerve Strickland ends up hitting with a big boot. Then he ends up hitting him with the house call kick. Then Swerve Strickland tries to go on the top rope. He starts celebrating to start taking a little too much time. Samoa Joe ends up coming from behind, sweeping Swerve off the top rope, and then Samoa Joe hits the muscle buster onto Swerve Strickland, and that's the end of AEW Dynamite. That was the go home show. This was a decent episode. Nothing too major happened on the show. This was a decent episode of Dynamite. But let me know what you guys' opinions, thoughts of tonight's show. I'm definitely going to make my AEW Dynamite predictions. I'm probably going to upload that Saturday. Can't wait for AEW Dynasty. Can't wait for that pay-per-view. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. But yeah, that's it.